Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles, where we prefer truth over narrative and principles over politics. And I am very excited about this interview, about the guests that I'm having on, especially with everything that's been going on over the past 10 years. We've seen a lot of political vitriol, we've seen political violence, and I think that Daryl Davis is one of the best people to help me address that. Before I bring him on, just want to remind you to like this and to share this and to subscribe if you haven't already. That helps out with the algorithms quite a bit. Also, leave a review on whatever app you're using. Just a couple sentences letting people know why you love my podcast so much. But like I was saying, I mean, just for those who don't know who Daryl Davis is, I'm going to let him introduce himself as well. But the premise is he's a musician and he's also an activist, been around for many decades, and he got some notoriety because he is a black man who got people out of the KKK, neo Nazis, and other white supremacist organizations by becoming their friends. Yeah, you heard that right. He managed to convert a lot of people out of these hate groups, not by yelling at them, not by ostracizing them, but by actually sitting down and having conversations. And I'm not exaggerating when I say becoming their friends, which is hard for anybody to imagine. But he's going to tell his story. I would love to know what you guys think about this because when you look at his example, it's not just about, dealing with racism. The stuff he does, the work he does, and the techniques he uses, and that he's learned over the years of doing this can be applied to politics as well. Because we're seeing a lot of hate. I mean, if a black man can sit down with a member of the KKK and have conversations, then the rest of us really have no excuse. So, to me, I think what he articulates here is probably the only hope that we have for reducing the animosity and the division that we're seeing today. And hopefully, you guys can glean something from it. Okay, y'all, I have him with me. I have here Mr. Daryl Davis, a musician, an author, and a rather unconventional activist type. Just for those who may not, for the like the two people who are listening to this who don't know who Daryl Davis is. So, welcome. First off, welcome to the program. I'm really glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Really appreciate it.
No problem. I'm very excited about this. So, before we get into everything, why don't you just, like I said, introduce yourself to the two people who might not know who you are, just who you are, your background, and everything they need to know about you.
Sure. Well, my name is Daryl Davis. I'm age 67. I'm from Chicago originally, and music is my profession, but trying to better race relations is my obsession. And I'm sure we'll get into what that means.
Yes. Yes. So, actually, I want to start with your musical career. I mean, how did you start getting into music? I know you've been all over the world. You had a rather unique upbringing. What made you become a musician?
Well, I never thought about becoming a musician as a kid. I never played as a kid. I always liked music. I had tons of records, which I still have, by the way, but always liked music. But I had two careers in mind for myself as a kid that were pulling me in opposite directions with equal force. So I was kind of immobilized.
Mhm.
On one hand, I wanted to be a spy. You know, James Bond was my hero. Yeah, and espionage agent, right? And the second career was computer programmer. Now, back then, computers took up more than this whole space you see behind me, you know. And I knew there was money to be had, but I never dreamed. I knew computers would get smaller. I never dreamed, they get as small as your cell phone or your wristwatch
Right.
or something like that. But each vocation was pulling at me in opposite directions, and I kept trying. For a couple of years, I kept trying to think. How can I combine these two? How can I have both careers? Because I like them equally. Well, back then there was no way to do that. Of course, today you can. It's called cyber espionage. But
Hmm.
by the time that term didn't even exist way back in the day. So by the time that term rolled around, I'd already made up my mind to become a musician. So how did that happen? As I said, I always loved music, and I made the mistake. Some people think I made the mistake, but made the mistake of going to see Elvis Presley and see Chuck Berry. And I said, you know what? That's what I want to do.
Awesome.
So I learned how to play, and I went to school, got my degree in music, and I learned from some of the best people outside of school: Pinetop Perkins, Johnny Johnson, many other great legends, that I had access to. A lot of them would teach me hands on. So that became my profession. Well, lo and behold, yes, I did travel around the world as a child, and I continue to do that now as an adult. How did I travel around the world as a kid? Was because of my father's job. He was a U.S. State Department. So I grew up as an American embassy kid. He was assigned to various foreign countries, and you stay there for 2 years, you come back home, you're here for maybe a few months, a year, and then you're back overseas again. So those were the formative years of my life. My first introduction to school was abroad. I first started traveling the world at the age of 3 in 1961. So I did kindergarten, first grade, third grade, fifth grade, seventh grade, all in different schools in different countries. Now, here's the interesting thing. My classmates in school, in the schools overseas, were from all over the world, because anybody who had an embassy station where we had our U.S. embassy, all of their kids went to the same school. So my classroom looked like a United Nations of little children. And that was the norm for me. Because that was my first introduction to school, that became my baseline for what school was supposed to be, right? So every time I'd come back home at the end of my dad's assignment, we're still in the 1960s, I would either be in all black schools or black and white schools, meaning the still segregated or the newly integrated, right? Desegregation, as we know, was passed by our U.S. Supreme Court in 1954, which is 4 years before I was born, right? Brown versus the Board of Education.
Right.
But schools did not integrate overnight. It took years and years, right? So one time when I came back, 1968, I was age 10 years old, and I went to a newly integrated school in 1968, right? So I was one of 2 black kids in the whole school, myself in 4th grade and a little black girl in 2nd grade. So consequently, all of my friends, were 4th and 5th graders, and they all were white. Several of my male friends were members of the Cub Scouts, and they invited me to join. I joined the Cub Scouts in 1968. And we had a great time, did a lot of cool things. And we had a parade. This is in Massachusetts. We had a parade from Lexington to Concord, Massachusetts, to commemorate the ride of Paul Revere. Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, Girl Scouts, Brownies, 4-H Club, different organizations. Streets are blocked off for the parade. Sidewalks on either side are lined with nothing but white people. And they're all waving and cheering, smiling, yelling, the British are coming, all that kind of thing. And I was the only black participant in this parade. There was no problem until we got to a certain point in the parade route, when suddenly I was getting hit with soda pop bottles, soda pop cans, and small debris from the street by a small group of spectators. I'd say maybe 4 or 5 people off to my right on the sidewalk. It wasn't everybody, just this, small group.
Small group.
I remember there being a couple of kids. Yeah. I remember there being a couple of kids, maybe a year or 2 older than me. I did not know them. And a couple of adults who were, doing all this stuff. My first thought was, oh, these people over here, they don't like the Scouts. That's how naive I was, because I had no precedent for that behavior. I've been around people from all over the world, right? And some of them looked just like those people on the sidewalk. So, the reason behind it was not occurring to me. And it wasn't until my troop leaders came running and covered me with their bodies and quickly escorted me out of this danger that I saw none of my fellow Scouts were getting this special treatment, just me. So now I'm wondering, what had I done to incur this violence, this behavior from these people? And I kept asking them, I didn't do anything. Why are they doing this? And all they would do is kind of shush me and rush me along, tell me, keep moving,
Mm-hmm.
everything will be okay. They never answered my question.
Mm.
So, and nobody else got any special protection. So at the end of the parade, I go home. My mom and dad, who were not at the parade, were putting band-aids on me and getting me cleaned up and questioning me as to how I fell down and got all scraped up. And I explained to them that I did not fall down, that somebody had thrown things at me. And so for the first time in my life, my mom and dad sat me down and explained to me what racism was.
Mm.
I had never even heard the word
So
racism
that this never
because
ever came up in all your travels until this
no,
pivotal moment in your life. Wow.
yeah, and I'll tell you, um, yeah, remind me in case I forget to tell
Okay.
you why I think. Yeah, at first well, let me finish the story here. So I was incredulous. I did not believe my parents. I'd never heard of this racism thing. I knew nothing about it, and what they were telling me, my 10-year-old brain could not process. How can somebody hate me when they don't even know me
Hmm.
just because of the color of my skin? This makes no sense. And they assured me that this was the case. And to prove to them that I was right and they were wrong about this, I pointed out the fact that the people who did this to me did not look any different than my fellow scouts or
Right.
my friends at school, or for that matter, my friends overseas, where they're my little Norwegian or Swedish or Australian or French friends, right? They look the same as those people on the sidewalk. So color had nothing to do with it. They assured me that it did. Well, of course, as I pointed out, this was 1968.
Hmm.
Martin Luther King was assassinated on April 4th. I remember it very, very well.
Mm.
Every major city in this country burned to the ground, including nearby Boston. We were only 8 miles from Boston. And all in the name of this new word I had learned called racism. There was a lot of violence and destruction after his assassination. So then I accepted that what my parents had told me was true, but I didn't understand why.
Hmm.
And so that question lingered with me. How can you hate me when you don't even know me? And I've been looking for the answer to that question for 57 years, because I was 10 then, I'm 67 now. So back to your point, in all this time, I'd never encountered it. And somebody asked me, a few years back, how come your parents didn't prepare you for this?
I was going
And
to ask
that was a
that.
good
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good question. I thought, yeah, I wonder why they didn't tell me about this. Let me walk out there and get stoned and stoned not as in getting high, but
Come
as
on,
stoned
mom
as
and
in
dad.
um so my if my parents were still around, I would have asked them, how come you didn't prepare me for that? But I thought about it, and I'm glad they didn't. And I believe it was probably intentional. Now, of course, I'm sure no parent would want their kid to be hit with bottles and rocks and soda pop cans. But I'm glad that I found out that way, as opposed to them preparing me for that. And I tell you why. Let's just say my parents, because I mean, this was the height of the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff was going on, back then, culminating with Dr. King's assassination. So I missed a lot of that stuff. My dad marched in the March on Washington with Dr. King,
Mm.
and but I was too young to know anything about what was going on, and I spent a lot of my time overseas. So, which we didn't see that kind of stuff. If my parents had told me something to the effect of, "Well, Daryl, there are some white people who don't particularly like black people, and you could get hurt. Just be very careful. Da 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 da. This, that, and the other." If they had told me that at a young age, would I be judging every white person I saw? Oh, maybe I should stay
Hmm.
away from that person. Maybe So I would have had a prejudge or prejudice
Right.
towards them, and not everybody is like that. So I'm glad that they did not plant that in my mind, and I found out this way because I had already experienced people who looked like that who treated me very well.
Right.
If that had been my first encounter with white people, would I be doing this work today? Probably not.
Yeah, yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, because the way I was raised, it wasn't the same as yours, but I was told about racism when I was a kid, but my parents never taught me that all or most white people are racist. They just taught me that it existed.
Right,
So, I mean, I was around
right,
yeah, I grew up in Southern California. I was around a lot of different types of people, white people. I ran into good white people, bad white people, good black people, bad black people, everything. So that was never ingrained in
right,
me. So I never was under the illusion that there wasn't any such thing as racial hatred. I'd seen it, but in general, I just learned to judge everybody on an individual level. So to me, it's so you go from learning this tough lesson to making friends with members of the KKK. Honestly, I watched the documentary Accidental Courtesy, and I would encourage everybody to watch that. And it blew my mind because I don't think I had heard of you before that. And this was like years and years and years ago when I watched it. And I heard your story and I heard you tell that story. And I was like, it makes sense given the way he was introduced to racism. Because it just sounds like if that hadn't been your introduction to racism, you might not have been doing what you do now.
right. That's, I mean, I would like to think that I would, but it's a good possibility that I wouldn't, because I would have a predisposition. Like, for example, let's say you were going to come over to my house and visit me, and you didn't know where I lived, and I'm giving you, directions. Come down this street, make a left at the second corner. I'm the third house on the right. I got a chain link fence around my yard, and you'll probably see my little lap poodle running around the yard. So you'll just come on in and knock on the door, and I'll answer the door, and you'll come in. But now, say I gave you the same scenario, but instead of me telling you there's a little lap poodle running around my yard, let's say I say there's a pit bull running around my yard. You might be like, "Whoa, is a pit bull cool?
Right.
Am I going to be okay?" All because of the reputation that a pit bull has. And not all pit bulls are bad, just like not all black or white people are bad,
Mhm.
right? But you are aware of their reputation that precedes them. And so, you might be a little trepidatious about, well, should I just walk in the yard with this pit bull? So, I didn't want, in retrospect, I didn't want my parents to prejudice me towards something, that could possibly be harmless.
So when did you or not when, what prompted you to take this step? Because as far as sitting down with people who think you're inferior because your skin is darker. I mean, and not only sitting down with them, but actually making friends with them. I know you tell that story about the bar and the guy who you didn't know was KKK, but then turned out to be KKK. How
Yeah.
did that whole thing materialize, and why did that propel you to use?
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
um, because I had seen so many people embrace me, and I mean, people across the Atlantic Ocean, people across the Pacific Ocean. Why were people that far away from me treating me better than my fellow Americans
Mm.
back here on my own, soil? Now, again, I'll give you an example of contrast. Um, One night I was coming home from a gig, and I stopped at this all-night restaurant. It was a truck stop restaurant, and it's like maybe about 2 o'clock in the morning or something, 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. And I'm pulling into the parking lot, and I see right on the sidewalk outside of the restaurant, I see about 3 or 4 guys, white guys, standing there looking at something a few feet away. I'm parking a little bit away from them.
Mm.
And when I get out of the car, I see what they're looking at. There's another white guy. He is straddled across a woman who's lying on her back on the sidewalk. He's sitting on her chest, and he is banging her head into the sidewalk and smacking her in the face. And these guys are just standing there watching this. not doing anything, not calling the cops, not trying to get him off of her or whatever. And when I I got out of the car, I saw this, and when I closed my door, I was gonna go over there and yank the guy off, right? Well, when I closed my door, it, I guess, jolted the guy who was on top of the woman. He turned up and looked at me, and he called me a racial name, and asked me what the F was I looking at, and I told him I was looking at him, and he asked me if I wanted a piece of him, and I said yeah. And he got up off of her and came at me, and I beat the daylights out of him. Self-preservation. But it was then, after I beat the daylights out of this guy, it was then that one of those 3 or 4 guys standing on the sidewalk went inside the restaurant and called the cops. Okay? So now the cops come, and the fight's over. But the cops come, and I wanted them to arrest this guy for assault. Now, I didn't get hurt. He got hurt. But they would not arrest him. Something odd was going on there that I could not put my finger on at the time. They would not arrest him. They gave him a verbal warning that he would have to leave the premises. And if he set foot back on this premises within 24 hours, they would have to arrest him for trespassing. And so when they told me that, I said, well, I want his information. So they by law, they had to give me this guy's information. So they gave me his information, and he left the restaurant. And I went inside. I got some ice for the lady's head and a towel, and helped her out and all that kind of stuff. I said, listen, if you need, if you want to press charges against that guy, I'm happy to come to court for you. And she goes, hey, that's great. I'm happy to come to court with you, if you want to press charges as well. I said, great. Okay. So we exchanged information. And long story short, I left and I went down to the police station because I'm going to file a complaint and get him arrested because the cops that came would not arrest him. Now, these were county cops. All right. So I go down to the station and I'm filling out the complaint, and I said to the commissioner, I said, how long will it take for this to be served? And he said, well, probably 3 days. You finish signing it. I send it down to the sheriff's office, and one of the deputies goes out and serves the guy. I said, okay, so I'm just finishing it out. And then lo and behold, in walks the guy that I beat up. And on either side of him, he has a state trooper, one on each arm. And he's handcuffed, this guy. So I said, that's him right there. And the commissioner says, well, sign it, and I'll serve him right now. So I signed it, and the commissioner walked out the office with a big picture window, and he stuck it in between the guy's arms, and told him he'd been served. So what had happened was he left when the county cops told him to vacate the premises. But when the cops left, he came back looking for me, and I wasn't there. So he went inside and started a fight with some other black guy, right? And so now when the cops got called, the state police were in the area, and they came. And I tell you what, county police will play around. State police do not play. They don't care who you are. Well, anyway, so they arrested him and, were bringing him to the jail, which is where I was filling out this thing. There's a holding cell within this police department. So anyway, I go and pick, a couple months later is the trial, the hearing. So I go and pick the lady up that he was beating up, and we ride to court together. And on the way to the court, she tells me that was her ex-fiance. And she had dumped him because he had gotten some other girl pregnant while she was dating him. So she wanted nothing more to do with him.
This sounds like a real stand-up guy.
Oh, yeah. Well, it gets better. So anyway, she's telling me, so she dumped him. And he's like, he wanted his cake and eat it too. And so if I can't have you, nobody will have you. Bam, 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 bam. Right? And so she tells me that he is on the county fire department, and he had just been promoted to lieutenant. So I realized then what happened. The county cops knew him. County cops know the county fire department. they respond to the same, incidents, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they were, giving him a slap on the wrist. And she said he was intoxicated and so forth and so on. And then she tells me he's a member of the Klan. So I'm like, okay. That, I thought that was ironic, but it didn't faze me because I would have done the same thing whether he was a Klansman or not. I'm
Right.
not going to, stand by and watch some guy beat the crap out of some woman. But anyway, so he was a Klan member and a lieutenant on the county fire department. So that was my first incident dealing directly with somebody who I knew was a Klansman or who I found out was a Klansman. So now to the other story. It wasn't that much longer after that incident. I don't know, maybe half a year, that I was in a bar called the Silver Dollar Lounge. And the Silver Dollar Lounge had a reputation of being not welcoming to blacks. There were no signs, and you would not be refused entrance, but you just were not comfortable there.
Okay.
You could feel you were not welcome, and so black people didn't go there. Now I joined this band that had played there, an all white country band, and I was the only black member in the band, and they were pretty well known around the area, and they all were cool. But they played there. I'd never been inside there. I've driven by it, but now I'm in the band, and they have a gig there, so I'm going to play the gig. So I go there, and people looked at me, but nobody bothered me. And we did our first set, came off the bandstand on break, and I'm following the band to go sit down at the table, and I felt somebody from behind reach over and put their arm across my shoulder. Now, I don't know anybody in here, right? I see the whole band in front of me, something, I'm turning around. And this white guy, 15, 20 years older than me, big smile on his face. And he says, man, I sure love your all's music. I said, thank you. And I shook his hand. And he pointed at the stage, the bandstand, and said, I've seen this here band before, but I had never seen you before. Where'd you come from? And I explained, well, yes, he told me they'd played here before, but I just joined the band. It's my first time here. Well, man, I sure love your piano playing. This is the first time I ever heard a black man play piano like Jerry Lee Lewis. And to me, Jerry Lee Lewis is a friend of mine, was a friend of mine. He's passed on now.
Yeah.
A good friend of mine, and certainly one of my idols, one of my rock and roll idols. He came up with Chuck Berry and Elvis Presley and Little Richard and all those people. And I knew him very well. So I did not take that as a offense,
Right.
or insult. It was kind of complimentary was how the guy intended it.
Yeah, that's how he
and
meant
that's how
it.
I took it. And yeah, exactly. And but I was shocked that he did not know the black origin of Jerry Lee Lewis's piano style. And I explained to him, well, Jerry Lee got it from the same place I did, from black blues and boogie woogie piano players. That's where that rock and roll, rockabilly style came from. Oh, no, I ain't never heard no black man play like that except for you. And so I'm thinking, okay, well, this dude never saw Fats Domino or Little Richard or whatever. And so I said, look, man, I know Jerry Lee Lewis. He's a good friend of mine. He told me himself. He didn't believe that either. Didn't believe I knew Jerry Lee. Didn't believe Jerry Lee learned anything from black people. He just thought I was, jerking him around or something. So, but he was fascinated with me and insisted that I come back to his table and let him buy me a drink. Now, I don't drink alcohol, but I agreed to go back and let him buy me a cranberry juice. So the waitress brings the drink, and he takes his glass and he clinks my glass and cheers me.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, this is the first time I ever sat down and had a drink with a black man. I mean, it was like he had impressed himself or something. And
that was a great news for him.
I mean, yeah. So I was totally mystified because at this point in my life, I had sat down with probably tens of thousands of white people or anybody else and had a meal, a beverage, a conversation. There are black people in this town. I've seen them. So how did he miss them all these years, right?
Yeah.
I innocently asked him, I said, why? He stared at the tabletop and didn't answer me. I asked him again, and his buddy sitting next to him elbowed him and said, tell him. And I said, tell me, because now I'm totally baffled.
Yeah.
And he says, I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan. And I started laughing at the guy because I didn't believe him. That's just too outrageous.
Right.
Look, I knew a lot about the Klan from my incident with the rock throwing. I wanted to find out about hatred and people like that. And then my first encounter with a Klansman, all I did was tell him, yeah, I wanted a piece of him. He got up, wanted to fight me. So, that was my impression of the Klan. And this guy's telling me he's a Klansman, and he's shaking my hand and buying me a drink and talking about Jerry Lee Lewis and so forth and so. This is not adding up. So I think the guy was joking with me, and I'm laughing. He went inside his pocket, pulled out his wallet, flipped through it, and handed me his Klan membership card. I recognized the Klan emblem, which is a red circle with a white cross and a red blood drop at the center of the cross. And I stopped laughing. This thing was for real. It wasn't funny anymore. And I give it back to him, and he was very friendly. We talked about the Klan, different things, unclan related as well. But he gave me his phone number and wanted me to call him anytime I was to return to this bar, because he wanted to bring his friends, meaning Klansmen and Klanswomen, to see, as he put it to me, the black guy who plays like Jerry Lee. Well, I don't know that he called me the black guy to his friends, right?
Yeah.
But that's how he explained it to me. And and I would call him every 6 weeks. He'd bring Klansmen and Klanswomen, and they would watch me play, and they'd get out and dance to our music. When I'd go to his table to thank him for coming, I'd meet some of these Klansmen and Klanswomen. A couple of them didn't want to meet me. They see me come in, they stand up and walk to the other side of the room. Mm-hmm. So the implication was, we just want to look at you. We don't want to touch you or shake your hand or, talk with you, which is fine, okay? So this went on until the end of that year. And I quit that band, and I went back to playing blues and rock and roll and whatever else was going on. It dawned on me a few years later, Daryl, you blew it. The answer to your question that's been plaguing you since the age of 10, how can you hate me if you don't even know me? It fell right into your lap. Mm. Who better to ask that question of than someone who would go so far as to join an organization, take a blood oath and join an organization whose whole premise is hating people who don't look like them, who don't believe as they believe. Get back in contact with that guy, that was so friendly. Get him to introduce you to the Klan leader, for the state, and then go up north, go down south, go to the Midwest, go to the West, and interview other Klan leaders and members and write a book. Because I have every book written on the Klan, and they all are written by white authors, except for two books written by black authors that dealt with the Klan, but each one talks about how he escaped a lynching, one in the 1930s and one in the 1940s, but not from the perspective of sitting down in person, face to face, interviewing their prospective lynchers. So I wanted to do that. I want to travel around the country and interview these people and ask them, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? So that's how the book project started. And I became the first black author to write a book based on in-person, face-to-face interviews with KKK and other white supremacists.
So I got to know, when you first embarked on this journey, and maybe you told some family members or some friends, how did they react? Did they think did they try to lock you up in a mental ward or?
Pretty much. Yeah. They pretty much did. I lost some people there because, people would ask me, they see me on the gig, come out and see me play with my band or whatever. And, what have you been up to? Well, I'm thinking about writing a book on the Klan. Oh, yeah, you're going down to the Library of Congress and do some research? Well, yeah, that too, but I'm going to find some Klan people to talk to. Like, Daryl, seriously.
I can only imagine how those conversations went.
Yeah. They thought I lost my marbles, right? But here's the thing. 30 years later, guess what? They're calling me, Daryl, what's going on with those people? You know them. What's going on with them? I said, you know what? If you had listened to me 30 years ago, you know what's going on.
So I want to ask you this because, you've helped over 200 people leave the Klan, and I think it's probably more than that by extension. But
yes, but it's not just Klan, other white supremacists as well.
Sure. Yeah. And we're living in an era in 2025, soon to be 2026, where we have a lot of hate going on, and it's not just racial. A lot of it is, a lot of it's class, a lot of it is political beliefs, religion, what have you.
Political,
Yeah, political. Yeah.
right?
So when it comes to, because I want to get into that, but first I want to ask you, what the members of these groups who you manage to change, or people who change themselves at your prompting,
Right.
so, or persuasion, um, what is the common through line between these people versus the ones who don't change?
Okay. Well, first of all, a white supremacist, whether they're a Klan, neo-Nazi, or alt-right, or whatever affiliation, or no affiliation, just
Mhm.
some, the run-of-the-mill racist next door or something. A white supremacist or racist is not stamped out of a standard cookie cutter. They come from all different walks of life,
Mhm.
all different educational backgrounds, socioeconomic statuses, etc. They go from the third grade dropout all the way to President of the United States. President Warren G. Harding was sworn into the Ku Klux Klan in the green
Mhm.
room of the White House. President Woodrow Wilson aired in the White House, "Birth of a Nation,"
Yeah.
the racist Klan movie. Okay, President Harry Truman had joined the Klan for a short time before he became president. He didn't like it; he got out. Supreme Court Justice Hugo Black from Alabama was in the Klan when he got the appointment to be on the Supreme Court. He had to leave the Klan in order to sit on the Supreme Court. Um, Senator Robert Byrd, who died a few years back, he
Yeah.
was the oldest living senator. He was a Klansman back in the 1940s. Later on, he saw the light, got out of it. He did a lot of great things for civil rights. So they come from all different backgrounds. Um, there are those who will see the light, and there are those who will not see the light. They want power, they want recognition, they want to feel superior, they want to belong to something that they feel elevates their status. So
Mm.
there will be people of any color, of any ethnicity, that will go to their grave being hateful, violent, and racist. Now, I've met the whole gamut,
Mhm.
from those who are hateful, violent, and racist and have committed heinous crimes, including murder and things like that, to ones who don't go out and commit these crimes, but they don't want to mix with somebody who's not like them. They
Mhm.
don't want to intermarry. They don't want their kids intermarrying. They join these groups to fight that and become staunch segregationists or supremacists or what have you. But they don't want to go out and commit crimes. So there's a whole gamut of them. Even some of the ones are the most heinous ones who would not talk to me and who want to fight me. I've had a few other fights since the guy at the truck stop, but fortunately those have been few and far between. Even some of those have come back to me later and said, "Hey, can we talk?"
Mm.
Something sparked, something saw. Okay, but there will be those who will simply go to their grave because they're just filled with hate and they just can't seem to get out of it. I don't give up on them, but I move them down my list of priorities. So the
Mm.
ones who are hateful and violent, who will sit down and talk to me, I deal with them first.
So
But ironically,
go ahead.
here's something that happens from time to time. So let's say you have two people who are hateful, violent, and racist, right? One will sit down and talk with me. Other one won't. Wants nothing to do with me. Wants to beat me up or whatever. So he refuses to talk to me, but his colleague does talk to me. And over time, that colleague sees the light and changes. And of course, the buddy thinks, this guy's sold out. He got brainwashed by me, or something like that. But this guy, once he leaves that ideology, his life improves and he's doing well. Well, the guy who wouldn't talk to me sees his buddy doing so well. He's like, I wonder, and it causes a cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now he wants to talk to me. So I've had that kind of thing happen.
So it sounds like, so I mean, for the ones who did change, what did they have in common, would you say? Like was there a certain trait or certain, I don't know, maybe type of awakening that they went through, or I'm just trying to see the difference because you got.
No, yeah, it depends. It depends upon why they joined. Um, and not all join for the same reason.
Okay.
Okay, like for example, there it may be a thing where my grandfather was in the Klan, my daddy was in the Klan, I'm in the Klan, and my kids are going to be in the Klan. So it's a family tradition passed down. It
Okay.
could be that. Okay, it could be they moved to a town where it's kind of a good old boys network. The town kind of run by the Klan. And so,
Mhm.
you come there as a newcomer and you want to do business there, you want to assimilate, well, you got to join the local country club, the local chamber of commerce, the local
Yeah.
KKK. Okay, sort of like in California, there are a bunch of gangs in certain towns, and you move into a certain neighborhood, you got to
Exactly.
join a
You
certain
gotta
gang.
join. Yeah.
Okay, if you want to, yeah. So there could be that reason. Another reason that I've seen is this. Let's say I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a coal mining town. I've seen this happen like in Pennsylvania and West Virginia. You have a depressed coal mining town. Most of your coal miners traditionally have been white people,
Hmm.
and they have worked the coal mines for generations and generations, right? Right out of high school, they go to the coal mines. So if they don't finish high school, they go to the coal mines. Well, with the influx of a lot of immigrants, whether legal or illegal, these coal mining companies, some of them see this as an opportunity to make more money. Hey, let's lay off our workers meaning the white guys, right?
Hmm.
And hire some of those people because they'll work for this much money and we're paying our guys this much money, right?
Yeah.
Because this much money in their country is a lot of money. So they lay off these white guys, and these white guys working these coal mines are not racist whatsoever. They're happy people, they're making good money, they're supporting their family, they love their job, and now they're laid off. And guess what? They cannot get another job because they're not qualified to do anything else. All they know is mining coal, right? So now they're unemployed. The bank is knocking on their door for the mortgage, or the car dealership is talking about repossessing their car because they haven't been paying their bills. They're out of work. So the Klan sees things like that in these towns. And the Klan will come to one of those
Mhm.
rural towns and hold a rally. And I've seen it. And they'll say, the blacks have the NAACP and the Jews have the ADL. Nobody stands up for the white man except the Ku Klux Klan. Your job is not gone, but some racial epithet, whether it's Hispanic or black, has your job. Why does he have your job and you're here? Your family has worked there for 50 years and you can't put clothes on your kids' back. You can't put food on your family's table. Come join us. We'll get your job back. So these people who were never racist, they're at wit's end. They have nothing. So it's like, well, what do I have to lose? I've already lost everything. And these people say that they'll get my job back. And they're right. My job is not gone. And why is he working my job when my great great grandfather used to work that job? It got passed all the way down to me. So it makes sense to them.
Yeah.
Okay, give me an application, sign me up. So people join that way as well. So there are many different reasons why they join. And if it's a family tradition where they've been around it all their lives, right, then sometimes it's a little harder for them to get out.
Yeah.
But then if they come into it from another avenue where they weren't influenced by all that stuff from day one, from the day they were born or whatever, then they have a little more bandwidth to see different things. But I've had this happen many times. Um, I give maybe 60 to 80 lectures a year, especially during non-COVID years, but all over the country. It may be to elementary schools, high schools, middle schools, colleges, corporations, police departments, synagogues, churches, etc. All right, 2 to 3 out of every 10 lectures I give, especially on a college campus, this will happen.
Hmm.
I'll do the lecture, I'll do a Q&A, and I'll show some robes and hoods that people have given me, when we've become friends and they've quit. Um, at the end of the lecture, I'm done, but there'll still be some students who have some questions. So they'll approach the podium or they want to see one of the robes, whatever. 2 or 3 out of 10 times there'll be some student hanging in the back of the auditorium, not doing anything, just hanging back there.
Mhm.
And I've come to learn what's up. He or she is waiting for the crowd to go away from me. And when the crowd dissipates and I'm just there packing up my stuff, he or she will come down and they'll like look around, make sure nobody's within earshot. They say, "Oh, Mr. Davis, I enjoyed your lecture." I say, "Thank you," shake their hand. And then they look around again. They're like, "My mother is in the Klan, or my father's a neo-Nazi or a skinhead or whatever."
Mm.
And that's how I was raised. I was raised that way. I'm from wherever they're from. And now I'm here at University of fill in the blank, any blank. And my boyfriend is Jewish, or my girlfriend is black, or my best friend is gay, and I can't take them home. My parents will kill me. My parents, will disown me. And I don't want to tell my friend because they'll drop me. So they got this secret that's sitting on their chest, burning an ulcer in them,
Mm.
and they need to get it out. They need to talk to somebody. So I'm the person they can talk to,
Yeah.
and I totally understand it because they come from some homogenous area where everybody goes to the same high school. They all vote for the same political candidate. They all shop at the same grocery store, swim in the same community swimming pool or whatever. And now they come away to college. But guess what? The high school and neighborhood where they came from may not come to that college. But on that college campus, there are neighborhoods and high schools from all over the country and maybe from all over the world.
Right.
So now they're seeing stuff they never saw in their neighborhood. And they're really realizing that Jewish people don't have horns and black people don't have tails and whatever other myths, get dispelled. And so, once the bell has rung, you cannot unring it. You've already heard it, right?
Right.
So, how do you go home and tell your parents and your high school buddies from home who didn't go to college that they were wrong? Your parents wanted you to get an education, but not that education. So I
Right.
see that happen quite often.
Yeah,
They come into an awaken exposure.
yeah, I mean, because the thing is, you're being confronted with proof, irrefutable proof that everything that you've been taught has been a lie or has been, wrong
Yes,
or what have you. That has to be pretty jarring for people. And, when you were
yes,
talking about, the coal mills in Pennsylvania and the resentment that came from people losing their jobs, like I almost felt like I can go on Twitter right now and see that exact same thing. What you just described, like you were describing something that happened then, but you're also describing something that's happening now in a different context. We're not talking about coal
yes,
mills by and large, but there's
right.
a lot of this animosity that comes from the notion that your way of life is being threatened, and the people threatening it are this group of people or that group of people or people who vote
Mhm.
this way or worship that way. And I've been, to be frank, I mean, over the past 4 or 5 years, I've been troubled by what I've been seeing in American political discourse, especially online. And the thing is, most of it is online, but it does come into real life. I mean, Charlie Kirk got shot in the neck for expressing opinions. I mean, somebody went and killed, some lawmakers in Minnesota because he didn't like their policies. And, you and I remember a world where this didn't really, we didn't have social media like that. So we can say that Twitter isn't real life, and it's not right now. But younger generations
Yeah,
are attached to their screens. They don't know a world where they don't have a screen in their hand all the time. They're getting influence, and social media is contributing to a lot of this violence. A lot of the younger generations, according to surveys, are increasingly accepting of political violence. This could go someplace very ugly, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you about this, because if you can sit down with people who hate your guts because your skin is darker and make friends with them, go to their weddings, hang out with them, then none of the rest of us don't really have an excuse. And I'm almost at my wit's end because I want to be one of those voices, and I know other influencers who are like this too want to be a voice of nuance, of reason, but it's hard to break through the vitriol. So I wanted to kind of get your insight on, what can be done to reverse this trend, or do you think it can be?
yes, it can be. And it's listen. I've always said this, a few things. One, ignorance breeds fear. All right. We fear those things of which we're ignorant, the things of which we don't understand or have not been exposed to.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't keep that fear in check, that fear in turn will escalate into hatred because we hate the things that frighten us, right? If we don't keep that hatred in check, that hatred escalates into anger, which then turns into destruction. We want to destroy the things that we hate because we got mad because they scared us.
Yeah.
Right. And at the end of the day, they may have been harmless and we were simply ignorant. All right. So we see that all the time. But in my opinion, and I'm only speaking for myself here, we spend way too much time in our country, a couple things. One, talking about the other person, talking at the other person, and talking past the other person. Why don't we spend a little bit of time talking with the other person? And also, we spend way too much time addressing the destruction that has occurred. Forget the destruction, okay? Yes, it's sad that it happened, but what's been destroyed is not coming back, all right? The destruction is a symptom of the nucleus, the root cause. We spend a lot of time addressing the hatred. Forget about it. That's another byproduct, another symptom. Forget about the fear, all right? The root cause is the ignorance. If we can cure the ignorance, then there's nothing to fear. With nothing to fear, there's nothing to hate. With nothing to hate, there's nothing to get mad about and destroy. So the good thing is this. There is a cure for ignorance. That cure is called education and exposure. And that's where we need to focus our time, our energy, our money, our efforts in curing the ignorance, because then all those other symptoms won't even manifest. All right. So we can do that. And, and this is true for adults. It's true for little kids too. Mm-hmm. Listen, I have lectured at elementary schools, right? Of course, I tone things down, for them.
Sure.
But
yeah.
they'll be sitting at their little desks, and there'll be 6 or 7 rows from the front to the back of the classroom of little kids. And I'll just be talking casually, and then all of a sudden I'll say, hey, there's a snake under your chair. And I'll point to some kid in the front row. And the kid will scream and throw their legs up in the air. Wah! Right? And when that happens, everybody in the classroom, all the way back 7 rows, throws their legs up in the air and screams at the idea that there's a snake under a chair in the front row. People in the back are throwing their legs up too, right? Okay, so then they realize there's no snake, and we laugh. And I said to them, why were y'all screaming? Why were y'all, freaking out and stuff? Oh, and the responses just fly. I hate snakes. I'm afraid of snakes. Mm-hmm. There's your fear. I'm afraid of snakes. I hate snakes. There's your hatred. So I say, well,
that's me.
Why do you hate? Yeah. I say, why do you hate snakes? Why are you afraid of snakes? Then you hear, well, they're slimy. They're poisonous. Well, there's your ignorance. If you ever touched a snake, it's not slimy. It's dry. Mm. And not all snakes are poisonous. Some snakes are good snakes. They eat the rodents, around your farm or whatever, right? So there's your ignorance, right? So I say, okay, so let's just say, obviously there was no snake under the chair, but let's just pretend if there really was a snake under your desk, what would you want me to do about it? You know what they say? Kill it. Mm. There's your destruction. Mm. Ignorance breeds fear, breeds hatred, breeds destruction. And these are little kids. They never killed anything in their life, but they want this thing killed. Okay, so This is where we need to focus. This is where we need to focus, our efforts. My favorite quote of all time is by Mark Twain, and it's called the travel quote. And Mark Twain said, "Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime." And that is so true. I have been blessed with the amount of travel that I've done as a child and now as an adult. when you combine my childhood travels with my adulthood travels, I've been to 65 countries on 6 continents. I've played in all 50 states. What does that mean other than I have a lot of frequent flyer miles or hotel points? What it means is I have been exposed to a wide variety of people from all different backgrounds. All right. And I can tell you something. No matter how far I've gone from our country, the United States, whether it's right next door to Canada or right next door to Mexico or halfway around the globe, no matter who I've met, maybe they don't speak my language or look like I do or worship as I do or not worship at all. I've always concluded every single person I've met anywhere on this planet is a human being.
Yeah.
And every human being wants these 5 core values in their lives. Everyone, universal. Everyone wants to be loved. Everyone wants to be respected. Everyone wants to be heard. We all want to be treated fairly and truthfully. We all want the same things for our family as anybody else wants for their family. And if we can learn to apply those 5 core values or any of those 5 values when we find ourselves in an adversarial situation, it doesn't even have to be about race. It could be about any of the things you name: political, religion, abortion, nuclear weapons, the war between Gaza and Israel, Russia and Ukraine, whatever. You're on one side, someone else is on the other side. Apply those 5 core values or any of them, and I'll guarantee your navigation of that situation, that culture, that society will be much more smooth, much more positive, and much more productive. Now, all this travel that I have does not make me a better human being than somebody with less travel.
Right.
But what it does is it gives me a better and broader sense of humanity than somebody who's not been exposed to that kind of travel and exposure, right? So I try to share that, vicariously with people, because all they can do is opine. They can make a speculation about somebody or an opinion, based upon something that they have not experienced. So their opinions don't necessarily supersede my experience. Like, for example, I lived in Africa for 10 years. I lived in Europe, okay, because of my dad's assignments. When I used to come back from Africa and I'd be in school here, kids would ask me if I saw Tarzan, things like that, where the lions running through my backyard, and because that's all they knew. That's all, I couldn't blame them. That's all they knew. That's what they were exposed to on TV. Every time you saw Africa, people were in mud huts and straw huts. No, there are buildings there. There are cars there also. Sure. And no, lions don't run through my backyard. And Tarzan doesn't exist, but that's what they know.
Well, he might. I mean,
well, in some place. But, I tell you what, I've been, you remember as kids, the most far off distant place on the planet was some mythical place called Timbuktu. I'm going to knock you into Timbuktu or something like that, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Guess what? Timbuktu does exist, and I've been there. I've been there, and when I went there, you could not drive in there. You had to walk in there. You bring your car to a certain point, you walk into the village. It's in the country of Mali, Mali, on the west coast of Africa. It's called Timbuktu, but we call it Timbuktu. Yeah. But it's Timbuktu, and I've been there, and so it does exist.
I had only heard about it from Looney Tunes, but I mean, you're right.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it gives you a lot to think about, because it's like an example. Like, people say the French are rude; they're always rude, and then so that's what I always heard. But I went to France. Everybody was nice. So I was like, okay, so that's just something that, somebody had a bad experience and things that just why I saw French people.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. But
right. So that's, so no. So that was my whole point. You went there expecting French people to be rude. Okay. So, that's why it was important in retrospect for me not to know that there are people who may not like me because of the color of my skin in advance. Because I would not have, I would have been expecting, oh well, they're a bunch of white guys. Maybe I should just stay away from them.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely in that when when I've heard you tell that story, I was thinking what would it have been like if that hadn't been his first experience. Like you said, you may still be in the same place, but I can see how that could lead to that. And I think, you know, I feel like we just scratched the surface. So I want to. I've got a billion more questions, but I want to respect your time.
Well, let's do a part two sometime.
Yes, we
I'd love to come back.
great,
And
awesome.
all of this experience, has led me to co-found a foundation called the Pro Human Foundation,
Mhm.
where I've seen so many people talk about what they're against. I'm anti this, anti that, this that. Okay, fine. We know what you're against, but what are you for? What are you pro? Okay, so I co-founded an organization called the Pro Human Foundation, which can be found at prohumanfoundation.org, O-R-G.
Okay.
And we have a lot of the tenants that I've mentioned today on this podcast. And we welcome anybody and everybody from every walk of life, every political leaning, whatever, to come together with our foundation for the common good. We get to learn about one another, we get to do things together, and I think it's a fantastic organization. And I would encourage your viewers and listeners to check out prohumanfoundation.org, and also check out my brand new book. It's called The Klan Whisperer, and you can find it on Amazon. My first book, Clandestine Relationships, is out of print. Don't look for that because some leftover booksellers have a few copies, and they jack up the price really high. But
Hmm.
the new book that just came out this year is called The Klan Whisperer, and it contains about 98% of the first book, plus updates and new stories, and it's reasonably priced.
Awesome, awesome. We'll be checking that out and definitely check out. It was a Pro Human Foundation.
ProHumanFoundation.org.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thanks again for joining. We got to do this again really soon because yeah, we're going to definitely need a
Absolutely.
part two because there's a lot. And so again, I thank you for joining the program, and I'll see you next time.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jeff. Take care.